and learn from you. And thank you to our audience for joining us here for our regular weekly session. So today we have a panel discussion with professionals in both academic and industry careers. And our goal is to learn more about what career paths are available after graduation in the learning sciences and in academia and industry in general. So the format of the session will be like this. I will introduce the panelists to the audience, and then we have a planned discussion where we will address 4 areas of interest. So it will take about 40 minutes, and then we're going to open up the session to everyone for Q&A. If you have any questions or any thoughts or reactions that you as the audience would like to share, you're welcome to throw it in the chat. Amy Adair, our master on the chat over there, will be handling that, and we can open that up at the end. So just for those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Danielle. I'm a 3rd year learning sciences student working with Ravit, and Amy is also a 3rd year learning sciences student. We're in the same cohort. So let me introduce the panelists to you today. So we have Dr. Leo, who is a managing senior research scientist at ETS. We also have Dr. Candice Gaitan, who is a research scientist at BSCS. I had to look up what this meant, so biological science curriculum learning, and you said you're really enjoying that. We also have Dr. Britt Haugen Chang, who leads research and development in STEM instruction, learning technologies and assessment at Menlo Education Research. We have Dr. Anthony Petrosino, who is a professor and associate dean in the Department of Teacher and Learning at Simmons School of Education and Human Development, SMU. And we have Karen Carney, who's head of school at Chicago Friends School. So as you can see, combined, we have such a rich and wide-ranging areas of expertise. So we're really excited to learn from you today. So now we're going to move into the panel discussion, and here we've selected 4 questions which we've shared with you beforehand to just learn from you in a wide range of information. And we've allotted 10 minutes per question, and we would love for you all to respond to each question. Don't feel like you have to, but we would just love to learn from you. So we've kind of allocated that for each question 10 minutes, and for each panelist 2 minutes per response. So we're just going to try and keep mindful of that so we can fit all the information in before 1 o'clock. And I'm just going to ask a question and just invite you to join in. So please just unmute yourself and respond, or you can raise your hand, whichever you feel more comfortable with. And silence is okay. We can take a minute here and there to gather our thoughts, but please just dive in. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. So our first question is, what potential careers did you consider, and why did you make the choice that you did?
I can start us off if, Dr. Lee, did you want to go first, please?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I'm Britta, just so folks know, it's the Norwegian E, so it sounds like an A. Thanks, Mom, for that very confusing name. So, one of the things I wanted to say about this is that I think a lot of times people think that you get done with your school, you apply, you get this number of offers. It's all very intentional and strategic and linear, and it doesn't always work that way. And especially when, if you're having a family or you have other things going on in your life that, kind of keep you in a location or mean that you have other things to consider, it doesn't always work exactly in this like pristine model. So for me, I was working part-time while I was finishing my PhD, had my son, was doing way too many things at one time, but sort of ended up working full-time at the place where I was consulting as a grad student, and very happily there for almost 13 years. So it wasn't like this thing where you're like, I'm going to stop and think and make these choices. It just sort of happened because that's the way my life was going. And I just want people to know that happens, and that's good. And, there's all these other constraints around you, and it will work, whatever happens that's going on, you can find ways to make that work. I did consider academia. I applied here and there for academic jobs, but I didn't find that any really fit the work-life balance that I wanted and needed with young kids. I just felt like I had a better work-life balance where I was, which was a soft money research organization, which, by the way, I want to distinguish from industry. There are ed tech jobs where you're in an actual tech company. I consider that industry. There's research organizations that may not be academia, but I don't consider that industry because, you're not actually trying to build a product or, there's no business model around, what you're trying to do. You're trying to do research, but maybe outside of the traditional academic institution thought. So I just wanted to put those couple of things out there, and happy to talk about other specific positions that I did or did not take, but those to me seem two big ideas that need to be said.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Britta just mentioned. I think my personal experience was a good example of what Britta was saying, that things don't happen as you plan. When I graduated, I actually my only selection at that time was to go to academia. I applied. I graduated in 2008. At that time, the job market was really bad, and then I couldn't find anything at that time. And then I went for a postdoc with Dr. Susan Yun from University of Pennsylvania. So I worked there for 3 years, and then some personal, things happened. Like I got pregnant at that time, and then I don't want to have this two-body issue with my husband. So I was only looking for a local job at that time. And again, my husband was working at ETS at that time, and then he forwarded me a job position and say, "This seems like a good fit for you." But I said, "No, I'm not considering industry." But then I said, for the sake of being, in the same local city, so I said I will apply, but I don't think I will go. So I did apply and then got hired there, and then said, should I accept that? And then I keep looking for, academia job at that time, but still nothing occurred at that time. So I said, okay, I will work there for 2 years, and then I'm going, go back to the job market to look for faculty position again. But I'm still here at ETS. So things will change, your mind will change. And also at that time, I think I have very narrow way of looking at industry at that time. So I thought faculty might be the only, feeding job for me. But I think as you're working at your mind is developing, and also your eyesight is also broadening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can jump in off of that. And I never did finish my PhD. I had intention of doing it, but I took a job before I was done, and got involved in that, and then got into another job and got farther and farther away from finishing and defending. And eventually 10 years later, I had to just kind of call it. At some point in grad school, I thought, because everybody thinks, you go into a faculty position because that's what you do. But for me, I'm right now working in formal education. I'm running a small school. Before that, I worked in informal education. I was the director of education and then the director of exhibits and education at the Adler Planetarium. And so I've been doing both informal and formal kind of applied learning sciences work, which, and also, by the way, a ton of administration, which has nothing to do with learning sciences work, right? But you learn it. And that's true probably also for the people who are professors on this panel doing a lot of administration. But for me, it kind of made me think about, what did I go to grad school for in the first place? I went to grad school because I wanted to learn how to do the kind of educational design that had impact. And then I started to just do the applied work in the field. And I would be happy to, I've done a lot of thinking about the difference between formal and informal educational environments from the point of view of design, and what are you looking for, and what are you looking at, and what are you focused on. My little one-liner is, if you go into the staff lounge at a museum, everybody's talking about content. And if you go into the staff lounge at a school, everybody's talking about kids. But, there's a lot of differences in terms of that little triangle of like learner, context, and content, like where the emphasis falls at each of those disciplines. But anyway, I've found it really fulfilling to be on the applied side of things. And my work in museums, millions of people have seen that work, but the average interaction is 45 seconds, right? Whereas my work as a head of school, we have kids who are in the school for 9 years, and that's a completely different trajectory and a completely different way of thinking about impact. So anyway, that's where I came from, and I now don't really want to go back and do research. So there's hope coming out the other side for that sort of thing.
So I would say I probably had like almost the opposite experience. I was teaching in Hoboken, New Jersey, actually, high school. I was doing a little kind of professional development at St. Peter's College. There were a couple of psychologists who were coming up there to help us think about problem solving and critical thinking. As the semester wore on, less and less teachers were involved till it was just basically one-on-one, me with these two other professors who turned out to be John Bransford and Barry Stein. And so having completed my master's at Teachers College, where I was thinking about, oh, maybe I'll be a department chair or maybe a principal, John and Barry said, well, what about doctoral programs? And I never really thought about that, never really had considered it. So I went down to Vanderbilt with the thought that 3 years and I was going to go back to Hoboken and become whatever, a principal or a chair. And so things took, various turns. It turned out I kind of liked what I was doing. I liked the research, and the 3 years turned to 6 and turned into a postdoc and all that. So ended up with a kind of a faculty position, which was great. But during that time, what I want to tell people is the experiences, I was able to start 2 companies, one on assessment and another one dealing with some curriculum. I've been able to help start 2 charter schools, one in Hoboken, OLA, Do Language, and another one in Texas with the University of Texas, worked with museums. And then ultimately, I even left academia for a little while, about a little over 2 years, and was the assistant superintendent of schools for a while, and then some consulting work as well. So what I would say is that there are multiple opportunities, and you can come in and out of it a little bit more than maybe people think you can. So I think I've kind of come in and out of both academia, and I would say industry, but there's also the public sector. So I would probably say academia, industry, and the public sector, where there's a fair amount of opportunities there, whether at the state levels, municipal level, even federal level for that matter, NSF and things like that.
So when I was on the market, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go straight into academia or if I wanted to go industry or to an academic adjacent organization like what I'm at now. But I basically just started emailing folks that I knew or had met at conferences that worked in a bunch of different places. I also just started cold emailing people that I had never met before, just asking if they were willing to talk to me about what it is they do, what they like about their position, what they don't like about their position, just so I could get a better sense of what was out there. And then I think, but ultimately what it sort of boiled down to for me were the positions that were available in the year I was on the market. So it was 2016, I guess, fall 2016 was when I started putting my applications in, and most of the jobs that I was seeing were actually in academia. And so that's what I ended up applying for. And I did land a faculty position. And so I did start out as faculty in a tenure track position. And I was in that for nearly 4 years. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. I love teaching. I love mentoring graduate students. But what I found, at least in the position I was in, was that I wasn't able to dedicate the time to the things that I had gone to graduate school for in the first place, which was to learn how to design learning environments that support students in, well, I guess the work that I enjoy doing is based in community-based design research and focuses on incorporating Indigenous knowledges into K-12 curriculum. And I just wasn't getting to dedicate the time that to that I wanted to. And so I decided to go back on the market and ended up at BSCS, where now that's all I do. And I get to do that across a lot of different projects. So I started to do a little bit of that work on Open SciEd Middle School, which is a huge curriculum design project out there right now. And I'm starting to do that on a couple of other NSF projects as well. So it's sort of my pathway. And like I think somebody was saying earlier, not linear at all, it's sort of all over the place. But yeah.
Thank you so much for your responses. I feel like there's nuance in what you're saying, but you all seem to be saying the same thing, that what you end up doing is an interplay between professional and personal goals and your passions, and whether it's family interests or personal interests, it all has to merge together. And I think us as graduate students can still relate to that. We're still balancing that, even though we're still kind of protected in the PhD world. So thank you. So our next question is, in preparing for a career, what skills from graduate school that we may not normally prioritize are most useful? And maybe actually, Candice, do you want to start since you went last time?
Sure. Oh goodness. I think just thinking about the things that I do day to day now, your ability to succinctly summarize complex documents and complex information is an incredibly important skill. I would say that's most of what I do. And like, just for example, once I get off this call, what I'm going to have to do is collate a bunch of research around the decline of salmon in the Pacific Northwest. And so I'm going to have to pull a bunch of science documents and start reading science articles and condense all of that into a couple of slides that I can throw into Slack for my team members so they can see what I've learned. And we can start pulling some of that into our design work. So I think that skill in and of itself is incredibly important. And to be able to do that across disciplines as well is really key.
Yeah, learning how to teach yourself is, I think, that wasn't going to be my skill, but like, yeah, it made me think about, when I started at the planetarium, I found myself co-leading a project on cosmology, on the origin of the universe, and I had to learn an awful lot of science awful quickly, and being able to kind of know what you know not what you know, understand the warrants for the claims, like that kind of intellectual rigor is useful in most job places, right? Like, I have less opportunity to be rigorous intellectually in my current position in an elementary school. What I was going to say that's super important is actually is a lot of the stuff that is soft skill, that, in a workplace, talent might get you a job and connections might get you a job, but what keeps you a job or gets you the promotion is showing up every day, being humble about what you need to know and what you don't know, knowing how to learn, knowing how to work with people, keeping a good attitude. Like, I used to have a little grid on my whiteboard in my office as a supervisor, and the grid, the 4x4 plot was how talented, right? Not very talented, pretty talented. How much of a pain in the ass? Lovely pain in the ass, right? And the people who are the incredibly talented pains in the ass, you don't want them as much as you don't want the people who don't have a lot of talent, right? Like, and the people who are lovely and talented, those are the people you promote, right? And I can't understand, I feel like in academia, at least my experience of academia was, there was always a little bit of a, am I the smartest person in the room going on? And am I the smartest person in the room only gets you so far as, am I the person who meets my deadlines? Am I the person that can collaborate as a team member? Am I the person who takes responsibility when things go wrong? And those kind of humanistic skills are just as important and in fact crucial to be a functioning member of a workplace. And so I don't want to just lose sight of those two.
Yeah, I think I learned right away that if I'm in the room where I'm the smartest one, that's a room to get out of. as quick as possible. But I would just say, follow up very quickly. Again, skills not taught in graduate school, right? So all the research skills or statistics or the reading or the literature, the other types of things that I think probably helped me most in reflection and thinking about this was, I think, a combination, two sides of a coin, is the tenacity to really be alone and work for a long time on a problem. Some people call that your dissertation. For me, it certainly was. But that type of self-reliance on yourself to get through, some really kind of difficult, both academic, scholarly, and even psychological kind of barriers. Conversely, the other thing I learned also in graduate school is how to ask for help and how to utilize colleagues, friends around, to help. I think I was probably not as, on reflection prior to graduate school doing that. And so really celebrating other people's expertise, celebrating other people's passions, intelligence, interests. So I think two of those things that weren't necessarily in the coursework, that when I look back on graduate school, I think have been good companions for me since that time.
You are also brilliant. I love these answers. Minor only slightly overlapping. I think people need to know how to do project management. Eventually you have to manage research projects and you need to know how to do that. I think that's some of what Dr. Petrosino was just talking about, but also, there's leadership in there. There's literally time management for yourself and for others, things like that, budgeting. Like, you have to budget an NSF grant if you get one. You don't just get it and do the work and it's done. And the people at the university, obviously they tell you how you can spend the money, but you got to learn how to do like some of these basic things. I don't think anybody ever taught me how to do it. I had the advantage of watching my advisor do it. But it wasn't something that someone specifically taught me how to do. I would also say, Dr. Liu said in the last response about being able to look at the landscape of what's going on in education and the research, and kind of think about it really, really broadly. I think we teach people about, specific pieces. And then somehow when you go out into the world, you got to figure out how to put it all together and where you fit. That also might mean that, we start teaching people about systems thinking, because education as an enterprise is a system. Learning is an individual, also systems-based, but is an individual enterprise, whereas education is a socio-technical system that needs to be understood that way. And trying to bring all the pieces, the intellectual pieces together to figure out where you want to be was something that I didn't know how to do until I started trying to figure out where the research was going to go, and how to think strategically about where I wanted to position myself. So that, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense from a grad student's perspective, but I'm sure folks who have been trying to figure out where to locate your position, where your research and your leadership in the field is going to be, you're thinking systems all the time, and trying to figure out how the pieces of what all fit together. So that's one addition to what my colleagues have said.
Yeah, I agree with all other panelists have shared so far. I think I particularly think that in terms of the intellectual ability, I think many people thought getting the doctoral degree is actually some kind of, a stamp of your expertise. But I think I would like to really enhance that. This is just the start of your learning. So actually, one of the things I found that was kind of challenging for me I think in the first 1 or 2 years of my workforce experience was that I need to learn how to be an independent researcher myself, rather than trying to think about always stick to the research areas that I worked when I was a grad student. So I think that's something that really motivated myself to continue learning and strengthen my research skills and become the go-to person in certain areas that belongs to myself. So I think that's really something that's important for many grad students to learn. And I wouldn't say there is a one learning pathway to do that, but I'm sure the experience can build up, and also you will become more independent when you graduate, after you graduate. And also, in addition to the intellectual ability, I think the soft skills in workplace are really also important to thrive in the workplace. So, for example, when at ETS we have many departments. So I'm from the research area. So many times when you talk to people would think that you're too researchy and they don't understand what you're talking about. So I think you really need to have a good way to communicate your ideas to the layman and also to other people who are not in your area. And also many times it's very, you need to pay attention to how you deliver your message in a positive attitude, even though you are critiquing something. I think that's very important at ETS, and because we want to be collegial and also trying to really work towards the best outcome. At ETS, researchers always play the role of being a critic and also trying to raise some critical thinking into the workplace. But sometimes it could be taken in the hard way. So I think communication is definitely a very important skill as well.
Thank you. These were such good answers. I'm literally taking notes over here. I'm sure we all are. So moving on to our next question. What do hiring managers in your field look for in a candidate, and what would be useful for graduate students to know about the interview process? Okay, Tony, I'm going to call on you.
Sure, that's fine. So it's kind of funny, actually. Where I'm speaking from right now, we're actually having candidate interviews coming in for a dean position, and so it's a national search, and we're at this hotel, and people are gathering and interviewing for hiring of a dean position here at SMU. But getting away from the academia job and looking maybe more toward other entities like school districts, or like the charter schools, or some of these business or consultant opportunities that I've had. In all honesty, as I reflect on this, I don't believe I have ever been employed or was hired for a job where I didn't somehow have some kind of contact earlier in the process. Either it was a friend or a connection or a reference, close reference, not just a kind of cold application to a company, let's say. So I'm probably not the greatest example of exactly what hiring managers are looking for. But what I can say is how to fully utilize your entire network. When I was kind of going through the process, there weren't these online sites like LinkedIn and et cetera. But even if there were, I'm not sure how much it would have helped in the positions that I was able to get. Everything, at least in my life, has seemed to revolve around personal interactions, friendships, professional colleagues that have led to the next position. So I'm probably not a great example of what hiring managers are doing, but in general, I would say, be nice and be friendly to people sincerely, and you will have also opportunities to help others. It's kind of a win-win situation, but almost everything has revolved around personal relationships for me. Even this position here as the associate dean at SMU, it's a little accident that one of my committee chairs is also at SMU, and his wife is the dean of SMU. So these connections follow you, and hopefully in a positive way.
I agree. And I forgot to, the first thing I had on my notes to say about what to learn in grad school is not necessarily that how to network, but that you are. Like the very fact that you're in a cohort in grad school, those are going to be your people. You don't even know how much you're going to want to talk to them as you go through your career. They become literally your like academic family. Like we joke, so-and-so's my cousin, so-and-so's my uncle. So just, you are already networking, just be conscious of it and do it well and do it. And the first thing I did when I jumped on this call was, who am I not connected to? And how can I like call up Karen and say, I'm sorry, I don't know you. I shouldn't use your first name without asking first. Can we do a cup of coffee and like talk about what you're doing and like just get to know each other a little bit, So, like that's really, it's also how you learn, because you get ideas, you talk to people, you learn what they're doing, you get ideas. I love talking with students at conferences because I want to hear what the next set of ideas coming up are. So that's, I also think it's how we learn is in those personal interactions. And Tony's a great example. I do know him well enough to say that. He is at conferences. He's smiling at everyone. He's just a joy in a room. So he's right about that. I look at for people. So I left SRI and started a company, which is Menlo Education Research. So I'm the founder of this very independent sort of research group who are people who are interested in working in partnership-based kinds of research. So working with schools, working with districts. So I look for people who can work across multiple projects and who are okay doing that. If it stresses you out to work across multiple projects, working in a self-funded environment is going to be hard for you. And it doesn't mean that people can't do it, even though it's difficult. But there are some people who thrive that way, and they have certain organizational skills which maybe I don't have. So I look for that. And that also helps me understand where people are going to be able to take initiative. And when they're, I want people to take initiative. I look for people who want to do that, but who know when and how, right? So it's kind of a hard thing to describe, but you're looking for somebody who's going to be independent and take initiative, but who knows how to understand the constraints of a problem and when that might not be the best thing to do and when they need help and when to come, get help from their colleagues. And then, those good soft skills go so far. I think a colleague said to me when I was first starting at SRI that he almost didn't care what he was working on as much as with who. And I was like, how can you possibly say that? And now I'm kind of like, that's kind of true. Eventually you put people around you who are working on the same things you care about anyway. So then eventually it's about picking from those people, who you want to work with, and you want to work with the people that you enjoy being with because you're going to spend a lot of time with them. And NSF grant is, 3-4 years. That's a long relationship. That's, longer than most people date, right? So like it's a long-term relationship that you have with the people you're with. So you want to be with people you like and get along with and who fill you up. And so you also want to be able to do that for them. So I look for that. And when I'm interviewing people to work on my projects.
First of all, anybody can call me by my first name. It's fine. In addition to me not caring, I'm also Quaker and we're all about first names. But like the kindergartners here call me by my first name. They do not know that I have a last name. I do not want to discount the idea of fit. I do a lot of hiring, and I did a lot of hiring at the museum, and I've done a lot of hiring in private schools, and I'll use the private schools as an example, that there are teachers who are incredibly good fits for schools that are not us. That, you have to understand the institutional culture. You have to understand the mission. You have to understand what they're looking for. And it is, one of the things that it's really hard with people, particularly kind of young people starting out, where they'll apply and they'll be like, well, but I have really good credentials. So why do I not get this job? And if it's really good credentials for a different culture or for a different environment or for a different set of job responsibilities, it won't matter, right? And the people who come and who have a good experience and stay are the people for whom it is a good fit. So, you know, what are the job responsibilities? How flexible? Am I somebody who needs everything laid out for me, who needs something, you know, to be very organized? Am I a person who wants the challenge of, you know, like where I am right now is a startup, right? And in a startup, you wear every hat you can possibly wear. For some people, that is a challenge. And for some people, that is a stressor. And, you know, for me, you know, I always, the last question in every interview that I do is, what questions do you have for me? And if the first what question they have for me is, what is the benefits structure? That tells me an awful lot of information about that candidate, right? Because they're not asking about the institution. They're not asking about goals. They're not asking about skill sets, about orientation. They're asking about what's in it for me. And while it's important to ask those what's in it for me questions, right, women, it's also like, if what I am getting communicated as a hiring manager, if what you're communicating to me is, I want to tell you all about myself, I'm not curious about your organization at all, and I want to know kind of what the transactional nature of our relationship will be, you're not getting hired. And I, you know, I have interviewed people who were really good fits for institutions that are not the ones that I'm running. And I have hired people who were not such a good fit for a different place, but would be a good fit. And so, similar to the idea of who do you know, right? It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? You know, I would say it's easier to get a job from somebody you know, because they can speak to fit, orientation, culture, and you already know a little bit more about them, and they already know a little bit more about you. Going in cold, do your homework. You know, what makes this institution different? What makes it tick? What's its goal statement? What's its budget like? What are its institutional priorities? Is this what I want? You know, and really, different organizations need different things at different times, right? Like, I was a good fit for the current job that I'm at because it was a startup and I had a really broad range of skills. The next head they hire here is going to have a much narrower set of skills, because they're going to be able to hire for some of the things that I'm kind of doing, you know, in my octopus fashion of doing everything. And, you know, and so they're going to want, as they get bigger, more specialization. And so it's also about, where is the organization in its life cycle? You know, there's a lot of kind of complex things, but it comes down to, it's really not as much about you or them as it is about, is this the right enmeshment of what you have and what they need? And that's different for every job. And, you know, I cannot emphasize that enough for people who are like, why didn't I get a job? Well, you didn't get a job because there's a very specific key and lock fit that everybody is going to be different for.
Yeah, my advice might be more traditional in the way that, because the hiring that I've been involved are mostly to hire research scientists or research assistant, associate level. So it's very research oriented. So I think usually there are, you know, you submit your CV, your cover letter. So those are the things that people read about, you know, what you look like, right? So they can imagine what kind of skill set that you can bring to the organization. So those will be the hardcore skills that you have to accumulate when you were in grad school. So for example, publications, research experiences, those you cannot make up like within 1 or 2 days. So I think you have to really start accumulating when you start your first day as a grad student. And then once you get to the point to have phone interview or on-site interview, that's when you really, I think many other advice that has already been shared applies here, that, you know, you show your personality, and you also you show your soft skills that, you know, people are looking for. So, and also present very concrete examples of to highlight your research skills. I think that those are really something that we are looking for when we are hiring people at ETS.
Yeah, and I don't have too much to add here, because I think folks have given a pretty great summary of these things. But since since I was just on the job market again about a year ago, I can tell you that, the kinds of questions that I was asked in my interviews were very reflective of the skills that we were all just talking about in the previous question. Like asking me how I work across multiple projects, how I'm able to manage my time across those projects, because that's absolutely something that you do in an academic adjacent organization, or even at any sort of nonprofit. You're probably going to be working across multiple projects and having to manage your time across those. I work on 3 different NSF funded projects right now. And so I have to think very carefully about how I structure my time each day. And I have different percentages of time allotted to those projects too. So I have to be careful that I'm really only allotting like 30% of my time per week to one project or 50% to another, right? And so those kinds of things are also important. How you work on a team. What opportunities have you had to work on a team? What does a team look like when it's working well together? And how have you handled experiences where a team wasn't working well together? And, we're all going to have those experiences. Sometimes you're going to have a team that works fantastically. Sometimes you're going to be on a team that doesn't really mesh well together, and you're going to have to still figure out a way to get the project done. So those kinds of skills are still very important. And then I think is exactly what Lee was saying, was that, when you think about the cover letter, your CV, whatever documents you have to submit, that's the first time, if the committee doesn't already know you, but that could be the first time that they're seeing your name and seeing who you are and what it is that you do. And that's really important. And I think, please have somebody else look over those documents for you. It is so important. I've led search committees at the university level, and I've been on interview committees and search committees now at BSCS. And it's so incredibly important that you communicate well who you are on those documents. And all the skills that we've been talking about, make sure you've written down those somewhere, because those are things that we want to see that you have as you're describing yourself in those cover letters, right? So that's really important to attend to. And speaking to what Karen was saying about the fit, it's the same thing in academia too. You can get an academic job, but it may not be the academic home for you, right? And that doesn't mean that it's on you either. It just means that there's another place out there for you. And I want everyone to keep that in mind. I think that there's sort of this culture in academia sometimes that if you aren't making progress towards tenure, if you don't get tenure, there's sort of this feeling of failure around it. And that's not the case. I think oftentimes it's just because it's not the academic home for you, and that there's another place out there for you. And so just want to make that clear, because there's going to be a spot for you out there somewhere.
Thank you for these responses. This is absolutely fantastic. We have a final question, but I feel like we have already touched on this. So I'm going to ask the final question. If you want to share something related specifically to this question, you can, but maybe if you have any other thoughts or anything that you just think would be valuable for the audience to know, maybe we can invite that in too. So our final question as a springboard is, what are some good places to look for jobs? Dr. Leo, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So for each company, I think they have the career website. So keep checking those places. Usually, they have some updates about the new positions, and you can look at when the position has been posted. I think usually the most recent ones are more promising ones. And then also LinkedIn is also another place that ETS has been using quite broadly recently, trying to disseminate some of the, the jobs information there. And also your advisor and your, the professors that you had connections. I've been doing part-time teaching at University of Pennsylvania. I have been always reach out to for some job opportunities at ETS. So if any of you have interest in any ETS positions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to, recommend your materials to the hiring manager if I can.
Now that conference season is upon us, one thing I highly recommend doing, not only, trying to put yourself out there and start networking with folks, is scan the programs or scan folks' name tags, whether you're virtual or like at home or virtual or in person. That's one thing I did when I was a grad student. I was constantly reading folks' name tags or looking at professional organizational affiliations in the conference program, because that gave me a sense of where folks in my professional societies were working. And then that also gave me names of folks that I might be able to reach out to and be like, hey, I saw that you presented at this conference, or maybe I attended your talk. Do you have a few minutes to chat? I found that to be an incredibly effective way. And that's how I found out about a lot of the different organizations out there, because there are so many nonprofits and industry jobs that it really opened my eyes to what's available out there.
Yeah, and I mean, the same thing is true for trying to cross domains, right? Like I heard you guys talking about ARA, which I haven't been to in 20 years, and I'm drinking out of my American Association of Museums mug, right, or water bottle right now from that conference. But I haven't been to this for 10 years either. So there are professional organizations and affiliations in every discipline. And, there are big organizations like AAM, and then there's small organizations like in Chicago, there's also like Chicago Museums Exhibitors Group. And that's where you go to meet the your level professionals in different institutions, right? Which is important for networking. Also, every group has its own kind of national and regional professional organizations. And those are where people advertise, like when I have 2 teacher positions open right now, I didn't put them on Indeed or, Craigslist, God help me, because I'll get people who've never seen children before. I put them on National Association of Independent Schools and our local accrediting organization. There are there are professional organizations for every career. And networking counts across disciplines too. Also, I got this job because I started as a volunteer for the organization. And there's ways of getting in the door in nonprofits that, get you introduced to people and help you understand the organization a little bit better and understand that fit. And so there's also lots of opportunities to, I know that volunteering, not everybody has the privilege of being able to take on unpaid work, but there's also levels of volunteering, right? I'm on 3 boards right now, and that's about 3 hours a week for each, or that's about, and that's about 3 hours every 2 weeks for each one. And that's doable. So there's lots of ways of doing that.
I would say maybe 2 things to try to add. So the first, which I tell all of my students that I come in contact with, as you go through the process, PhD process, whatever it is, that you're really looking for a match more than a job, I think. And so that goes for the same, whether it's a academic position or if it's in industry, government, et cetera. So really want to try to hold on to that possibility of seeking the match where you're going to be satisfied, the organization's going to understand who they have hired, who you want to be associated with, and that match can really lead to so many great opportunities. The second thing I would say is maybe throw a little monkey wrench into the question, but something to consider, I would think. That as you're finishing your program and your degree and wondering, it may be one of the best times to think of not necessarily a job, but your own company or starting something of your own and entrepreneurial. The money requirements, the income requirements, like I said, are not necessarily to be taken for granted, but we've all kind of experienced a number of years of not having a large amount of income as graduate students. It's not the most difficult thing to replace. And in some ways, there may never be a better time to start a business, a consulting firm, use your contacts if you don't find exactly what you want. I don't think it's ever been, the environment is good. You'll have your connections, you'll have your network, as the people have brought out, that's there. And it may be something to consider and give it a try, maybe for the first year or two. Again, assuming everyone's individual finances are a little bit different, but you know, a couple of people who did it kind of right out of the block, and things really worked out well for them. So just throwing that out as a consideration.
I don't have anything to add, so just what I wrote in the chat, which is that I literally read every CV that comes to me, because I see it as an opportunity to make a match that might not happen through more formal channels. So, or, you know, I or someone are always reading those. So just reach out to people, even if there's not something maybe posted on a website, you know, go for it. You never know.
Thank you. These responses were so valuable. I think you've given us new avenues, new ideas to think about. So thank you so much. So we have a little bit of time left. So I just want to open up the floor to the audience. If anyone has any questions or comments, reactions, any appreciations, we would welcome your input too.
I put a question in the chat, but I could read it out loud as well. So I know some of the panelists have discussed like having children and raising children while starting their career. So how did you navigate the competitive nature of the job market in the field while raising a family? And did you feel like you were held back in any way from opportunities?
That's such a hard question, because the answer is you will struggle. You will struggle with feeling like you're not doing a good job at work, and you'll struggle with feeling like you're not doing a good job at home. And I just have to be super, super honest about that, because I grew up in the 70s and my mom said to me, you can have it all. And it's like, yeah, you can have it all at 75%. And she didn't put that like second part on there. And I was like worried that I was doing something wrong. And it's not wrong, and it's okay. And it's actually what 100% should look like. You know what I mean? It's just that we don't feel it that way. So it's a struggle. I did feel like I was trying to I wouldn't say I felt like I was constrained or held back. You know, I had a partner who was very, very supportive. And so we just had to give each other time, like, oh, this is, you have to, oh, okay. I remember at one point in our family, there was like a whoever gets the conference on the calendar first gets to go. You know, it was like, there was no other way to choose sometimes. There were times in family life where I think we felt like the kid had one parent usually at one, you know, like there was not a long period of time, but there was periods of time when it felt like that. He's brilliant. He's lovely. He's fine now as a high school senior going on to college. So it'll all be fine. We all do it. It never feels good. You know, I just have to tell you that, like, it's not going to feel, I'm on top of it all. It's just not going to happen that way, but that is what it is. And so you are on top of it. You just have to, you know, recalibrate a little bit, because that is what 100% looks like. And it's okay, and it's good. And just surround yourself with a bunch of people who are at the same stage as if you can, and offer help and take help, and just make a little village. I don't know if that's helpful, and I'm sure other people have other things to say.
Yeah, I think sometimes you may also do some research about the, the company's working environment, because you can check with colleagues who have, such experiences and see how flexible, the company's policy is. Like at ETS, we are very flexible. If there are any family emergencies or you need to take off time or leave a little bit earlier, I think we are very flexible in that way. So, and plus, I think I have a 10 years old. So in the past 10, actually, I joined ETS when I mentioned that I was pregnant at the time. So I joined ETS for 10 years already. So I think the past 10 years was really a good learning experience for myself to learn from my kids growing up. And I'm in education, so I'm applying a lot of the educational theories and observing my kids, how my kids grow. So I think that it's a win-win situation for me.
I think that was beautifully said, and I don't know if we have any more questions or if we should end on a high note. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the time and the opportunity. I very appreciative of being asked, and it was a pleasure to participate.
Thank you
Same.
so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, if anybody has any further questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk to folks.
Yeah, same here. I'm glad to contribute back to the GSE community here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been really terrific. And we have another brown bag next week. Hopefully we'll see our participants there. And thank you again to the panel. This has been brilliant and so helpful.
Thank you. Thank
Look,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
Bye-bye.